How's it going, folks, and welcome to the Wild Thing Podcast. This is your Jon Moxley career retrospective podcast. I'm your host, Joey O'Doherty, and it's my job each week to walk you through a period of the career of the purveyor of unscripted violence, Jon Moxley. We will look at everything in his career, from his early days on the indies to where he is today, a main event level talent in all elite wrestling. So that means we will look into everything from his stint in FCW, his run in G1 in Japan, and of course his time as the Lunatic Fringe, Dean Ambrose and WWE, including his popular time with The Shield. As this is the first episode, allow me to give you some insight into how this podcast was conceived. I'm a wrestling fan since 1990, and I've always loved discussing the highs and lows, the good and the bad of professional wrestling. Now, from reading the autobiography of Jon Moxley, which is simply entitled Mox, if you haven't read it, get on it, I've been inspired now to rewatch his wrestling career and document my findings here each week in this podcast. So if you're a fan of the man known as Jon Moxley or Dean Ambrose and wish to hear some uneducated yet glorious chat about the man himself, then strap yourself in, ease the seat back and get ready for a trip down Moxley memory lane. This is Wild Thing. Today our topic is a feud between Dean Ambrose and the wily veteran William Regal from the development days in Florida Championship Wrestling. And today my guest is none other than the host of the AEW Match Guide podcast, which is available on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. From Wrestling Headlines, it is Sam Brown. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Joey. Thanks for getting me on. People who know me know that I can never shut up about Dean Ambrose and Jon Moxley, the wrestler that he is. So I'm stoked to be here on this podcast. I'm stoked that you're doing this podcast. Can't wait to listen to all of the episodes you put out about this. And yeah, I'm excited to be on it in one of these early episodes, talking about Dean Ambrose and in a formative moment for him as well. So yeah, let's get going.
Yes. And first thing foremost, like, obviously, let people know what's your background in wrestling. When did you get into it, and what is probably the best thing that you've ever experienced in professional wrestling?
Yeah, look, I got into wrestling at a funny time. Most people I find talk to about wrestling, they got into it when they were a kid. I didn't actually do that. I think I played a few I played a few wrestling games. I think I played a WCW one and a WWE one, but I definitely never watched wrestling as a child. And I stumbled upon it when I was at university. So when I was 19 years old, and I was watching, I randomly stumbled across a SmackDown highlight show that was on Australian TV at the time and free-to-air TV, because wrestling over here is primarily on pay TV, which I didn't have as a kid, so I never saw it. But I stumbled across a highlight show and was captured by, get this, Batista versus the Great Khali.
My
a
word.
match they had in the main event of SmackDown. Yeah, they had Batista was in a great little rivalry with Edge, and I don't know, there was just something about it that caught my eye, like these two real larger than life characters in so many ways, and embroiled in this like really kind of funny little story. And at the time, of course, I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. I kind of knew that wrestling wasn't real, but I was like, how does this work though? Is it that they work it out beforehand and then just they fight in the ring, or what happened? And like I then went down a rabbit hole, initially watching a lot of Batista and Edge stuff. They sort of were the two conduits to get me into things at the time. I got into Chris Jericho versus Shawn Michaels, was a feud that I really enjoyed as well. And of course, Edge went on to have a great program with The Undertaker after the Batista thing was just more like a side plot that I'd stumbled across that he was in at the time, to a broader feud he was having with The Undertaker. And that sort of, I was off to the races at that point. As a wrestling fan, dug into things like, I love digging into Mick Foley, bought a bunch of Mick Foley stuff, read his books, loved that. And that's how I got into wrestling.
Typically speaking, Sam, what floats your boat though, so people can get a gauge of what you like? You know, what gets Sam Brown going in professional wrestling?
Yeah, look, the thing that I always come back to when I'm enjoying wrestling, I love the athletic side of it, but the thing that I love digging into and that I love talking about is the character and story part of it. Wrestling is a really unique medium in terms of the way it can tell stories. You look at any other thing, even like long-running soap operas, right? Like you'll watch an episode of that and they'll skip half an hour for us might be 2 or 3 days for the characters in that. That's not the case with wrestling. Everything happens at the same pace that we're experiencing it. And that just gives so much potential for such long-term and intricate storytelling and character development that happens over a really slow time, but it's something that you can really dive into and sink your teeth into because it's happening in real time and it's happening over such a long period. And that's why one of the reasons that I love Dean Ambrose, Jon Moxley, who we're talking about today, because I think he is a guy that has a really complex character that's revealed itself over time, and he has had some of the best storylines that have happened have happened in wrestling. Like you asked, what is my favorite thing in wrestling? It may be different now, but if you'd asked me, back in 2019 before AEW came around, I would have said without hesitation that Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose and the relationship they've had from when they met in FCW through to when they reunited in 2017 was the greatest story that wrestling's ever told. And I still, in many ways, will ride for that story, that particular 5 years of story, a lot, because of just how dynamic it is, how fleshed out the relationship and the two characters are.
Well, you talk about character development and story progression being your thing. Did you have any memories of the character of Dean Ambrose in FCW? Did you have any sort of, fondness or even recollection of Florida Championship Wrestling, which was the precursor to WWE's NXT developmental system?
I've previously watched the Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose stuff. I've previously watched this William Regal stuff. Haven't seen anything else in FCW really. So actually, no, that's a lie. I think I saw a Bryan Danielson and Low-Key match at some point many years ago. So I don't, the details of that are very hazy, but I definitely have watched those two programs, the Rollins and the Regal stuff, beforehand. Sorry, what was the question again, Joey? I've forgotten what
it's Dean Ambrose.
About.
You're grand. Dean Ambrose, he starts off in FCW. This is his first. He comes in. It's his promo. He just comes in and more or less introduce you to the character. So you've seen this promo. You've seen what he's like. You can see the shades of Brian Pillman, Roddy Piper, yep. Steve Austin. What's your opinion on how did he present himself?
It's very interesting. He's got a weird way of carrying himself. It's not a way that any other wrestler even tries to do, which is interesting. It almost, to apply it to a real life context, it almost reminds me of, I'm not sure if you're an MMA fan or not, but it reminds me of the Diaz brothers. They're always sort of a little bit awkward. They're always scratching their head or looking off to the side or something when they're doing an interview. It almost reminds me a little bit of that. But I love how the brilliance of Dean Ambrose, of this guy as a wrestler, is that he can say the most cliched wrestling things, but it sounds completely believable and completely different coming out of his mouth. What he says here is, forget what you knew, I'm going to blow the doors off. How many basic ass wrestlers have said that? Forget what you knew, because the man's here to blow the doors off. How many people have stared down the barrel and said that? And that's what he says here. But because of his delivery, because of the way he carries himself, the other verbiage he's got going around it, you believe it on a different level, and it hits on a different level to anyone else. And that's the magic in Dean Ambrose.
From me, full disclosure, I'd never seen this moment until obviously rewatched. So this was completely new to me. But you can see this guy's got an aura about him, and not obviously in the same way, but you can see how Hook and Jade Cargill have that something about them. You can't really put your finger on it, but they've got the swagger, they've got the visual look, they've got verbal skills. This guy, vocally and verbally, he's got tools here, and he's in the process of piecing all these pieces of the puzzle together. He's we see that today. We have it in Jon Moxley. Back then, he's got something. There's something with this guy, and it's easy to see what the likes of Regal, Triple H, even to a lesser extent, Tom Pritchard, seeing in this guy going. And did you notice who was interviewing him at this point?
Nick Namath, isn't it?
It is indeed the former Briley Pierce,
Yeah.
and he's such
The
a
Hollywood
geek.
blonde.
He right here now, compared to what we want. I love his stick at the moment with the wingman. It's fantastic little lower card act, and he does that really well. But back then he's so generic and he's so cliched. It's like, oh, this isn't this guy.
Isn't it crazy how much of a small world wrestling is though? Like, like years ago, he's in a promo. He's having he's the ring announcer, and Dean Ambrose is giving his debut promo in FCW. Like fast forward many other years forward, and he's in a match with with Jon Moxley in AEW, or
a very quick match.
Yeah, very quick. And one other, just with this debut promo, one other detail I like is it cuts to William Regal, and William Regal's just looks so excited by Ambrose's hunger, and just puts him over so well, saying how great it is to see people with Ambrose's hunger.
Oh, the smile is like a Cheshire cat. He sees something he likes, and it's that little bit of a fire ignite. He's like, oh, I like this guy. I like this. And this is there's obviously a little bit of, he reminds me of me. This is it, and it's great foreshadowing for what we get. Like it basically, this is a developmental feud, so it's like, it's very small scale in terms of, and well produced as compared to obviously more things on the main roster or in any other sort of promotion at the time. But you can see this is a great little seed, and it gets so beautifully as things go on. He has the feud with Rollins, and he has obviously some really good matches there that gives him props him up in the FCW. But then, it eventually comes to the point where, obviously someone has the idea, let's put him with William Regal, let's go with this, there's something here, let's go. And it culminates in this battle royal melee you have here in FCW towards the October of 2011. There's a lot going on, bodies flying everywhere. Maxine, if you can remember her from NXT days, she falls over, and the chivalrous William Regal comes to her aid. And during this whole melee, Ambrose, he takes a little glance, he spots something, and he's thinking to himself, maybe I've got a little opportunity here. The wheels are turning, and it's what did you make of how this feud began?
Yeah, it's kind of odd how he comes out and he's in a jeans and a leather jacket, and everyone else is in their ring gear, and he's very obviously not getting involved in the melee. But you mentioned it before, the wheels are ticking over in his mind. As everyone leaves the ring, he sort of notices out of the corner of his eye that Regal's over there, and you can see him making the decision almost in real time. He's tempted by it, and he's like, oh no, I probably shouldn't. Goes out, and then he looks back and he's like, oh, but I really want to. And you see him go through those methods of temptation, and then ultimately give in and just go over and immediately attack Regal. And man, I just love how Regal so quickly goes, all right, we're fighting, and just unloads. I can't remember who the announcer is. He just says, you just opened a door I don't think you can shut. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. That's the perfect way to put this thing over.
And the commentary from watching segments over the course of this 6-7 month period, the commentary is very simple. They obviously haven't got the same, Vince McMahon yelling in their ears. Don't get me wrong. You probably have, Tom Pritchard or Bill them up probably yelling in their ears, probably not to the same extent. But the commentary is very good at just highlighting these guys, strengthening them, building them up, covering them for them when necessary. And I think they do a great job at just, like you said, that line there. It's fantastic. And I loved Ambrose just weighing up the situation. He's making his mind up, and he's like a young lion thinking, "Listen, I got the old guy here. I'm gonna pounce on this guy right now." And he wants this scalp, and and in a weird way, you can see Williams he's approving of this. He's in a weird kind of step.
He gives him an applause afterwards. Yeah, they're both smiling. They're like, yeah, I like this. And
it's a real unsaid mentor pupil dynamic, and it really works. I just think he clearly isn't his pupil, but in a way they are. He's obviously look at this guy and think himself, I want to be kind of like him, and if I'm gonna want to be like him, I'm gonna have to take this guy out. And
absolutely.
Regal's commentary after the fact, like he's harping lyrical about this guy. He's still putting him over. Like he's in love with him nearly. He's infatuated. He's like, clearly it was amazing for him. And like, you could see this, like, the pride is nearly coming out of Regal with every sort of mouthful that he sees what he sees. He sees someone who loves hurting people. He sees the same sadistic quality in the younger guy, yet he's obviously very inexperienced Ambrose. And it's like, he takes a shine to him, and it's a fantastic mentor-student dynamic that I think is twisted on his head, and I personally loved it. There was one really good line that I think Regal had in commentary in obviously during one of Ambrose's matches, and he's like, I think if Byron Saxon says, "Hey, what do you think's going through Ambrose's mind?" He's like, "I have no idea what's going through his mind. He's so unpredictable, and I love it." He's like, "I've no idea what's going. That's why I love him. That's why I love him." And like, it just makes so much sense, and it's so simple storytelling, but it's very compelling.
Absolutely.
Given the two men involved, you have obviously great storytelling. Obviously, see as we come forward into their career, in hindsight, you can see this was easily Regal probably leading Ambrose towards this thing. But they have great chemistry. But obviously, individually too, they can go, and they're people that you want to see in a fight. Especially in hindsight, I'm thinking like Ambrose he's a great brawler. Regal can go, he can be very technical, and he likes a bit of pain. So the story for me here is simple. Like, young line targeting old line, Ambrose versus Regal, and we come to the first match in the end of October 2011, and basically, like, this is the first real, big feud for Regal in FCW. It's been a long time since he's really got his teeth into any sort of thing really big at this stage, from a WWE point of view. So, first of all, what did you think of this match?
Really good, really interesting. It's like such an interesting subversion of what you expect to happen in this situation. Because of course, like, when they're in developmental doing these sorts of things, and Dean's obviously been made to be one of the central stars of FCW, like, you think that he would win. And that Regal is doing this to like put him over and give him a little bit of a rub, but that's not what happens. Like, Dean is in a fight that he's not ready for, and William Regal is like just a man reborn and just reveling in how ruthless and brutal he can be, taking apart this pretender, almost not a pretender, but like, as you said, like, there's almost like a student pupil aspect to this, and Regal is almost showing Dean how much further he has to go. He's like, I know you'll get there one day, but you've got further to go, and I'm going to show you that by showing you like myself in full brutal mode, and I'm going to take you apart, and I'm going to hurt you, and you're not going to enjoy this, but I'm going to enjoy doing it.
It's nearly like he's like training him up to take himself out. Like, he's training this assassin who is basically, his objective is going to be to take him out. And that's like yep. the match itself. Like, I think first things first, like, Regal coming down to the ring, he's like a bride walking down to the altar to meet his love of his life. He is smiling from ear to ear. He is absolutely, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but he's enjoying himself.
Absolutely, yeah, and like in the video package before then, he's like, I have a tear of joy.
Yes. it's such a,
I'm finally feeling alive again for the first time in years.
The flame is back, and Ambrose loves this. Well, Mox, he even references in his book. He referenced that whole promo in his book, Mox, which is an excellent book if you haven't had a chance to check it out. Obviously, being a Mox fan, I have, but it's you can see this meant a lot to Ambrose at the time. This is like, this is a big deal. He's getting a rub from a guy he really admires, and like, it's perfect for him. And like, the match itself, like, don't get me wrong, like, I enjoyed the match, but it's a fight. There's nothing fancy here in terms of, like, really like high flying moves. There's never going to be with these two guys. There's no real smashing exchanges in terms of, smooth, silky, transitions. These two are going to try and kill each other.
Yeah, and it's really creative in the way it does it, though, because like, the central piece of this match, right, is that William Regal pins Dean Ambrose's arm in the turnbuckle and just knees the bejesus out of it. Like, he is ruthlessly assaulting Dean Ambrose's left arm to give him that lesson. And then he stretches it afterwards. And he's like reveling in that brutality he's dealing out. Like, he's stroking his chin while he's doing it, like observing the handiwork that he's done. But we spoke on my podcast. I'm not sure what the timeline of the releases for this will be, but we spoke of when Jon Moxley obviously had an eye patch. And one of Jon Moxley's like greatest attributes is how he fires through those sorts of obstacles and fires up. And that's what happens in this match. Like, he fires up, but he never gets back to using that arm. And, you know, in a lot of matches where someone will work over a body part, towards the end, when they're getting into the final stretches, that body part will be revitalized or reused. But he doesn't at any point in this match. He continues to fight with one hand, with one arm, and with his other one, his left arm, lying limp behind by the side of his body,
thing
which
written
is really
down.
creative.
It's fantastic. Like, it's just little simple things. It's so easily forgotten when a match is going on, someone's working over a body part, that like when the babyface fires back up, it's just like, well, he's fine now. What was the whole point of that? This was he's selling, his arm's gone limp. The whole focus is on the psychology side of things, that he's going to take this arm out, and like it just makes so much more sense. And again, it's something so simple, it's smart, it's logical, and for me as well, like, you know, it's fresh. It's very fresh.
Yeah, and towards the end, like, when Dean knows that he's beaten, he's like almost begging for the finish, and he's like happy in the fact that he knows he's about to get killed by Regal. Like, he's about to get knocked silly by Regal. And it goes back to, I'm not sure if you've seen this promo, but there's a famous promo that he did, and I think he actually talks about it in his book, before he was in FCW, and he talks about, like, I'm a really nasty person, I drive real fast, and I like to bang ugly chicks just to see how it feels. Like, and he's like really happy in this moment because he is experiencing this new thing that he's never experienced before, and he's about to get put out. His lights are about to get put out by Regal, and he's like almost reveling and excited in that moment, which is a really interesting thing for a wrestling character to be, like, the relationship that he has with pain, being that he almost is getting joy out of receiving it. And, you know, as I said, it's an incredible job of selling, a mix of selling that the pain that he's in, but also fighting through it, but then also being happy and reveling in the fact that he's getting taken out, essentially.
I love the spots where he's getting his arm trapped, and it's just like, this doesn't get, you know, used enough in professional wrestling. You know, like the turnbuckle, like the selling of how he's trapped in the steel steps, and how he's like he's kind of left there after Regal walks away. Like, I was like, yeah, like it makes sense. He's putting this whole spot over, and it's like, it's simple, it's effective, and like for me, like I think, like, again, there's some really good moves in there, some really nice exploder suplexes. The knee trembler finish was the put Ambrose out of his misery, looked really well. Like, overall, I really liked it. Like, I think it was a sense of realism. I enjoyed it. It was a bit slow at times, it dragged at paces, but Regal is, of course, he's at the stage of his career where he's never going to do anything really at breakneck speed. But, you know, I prefer my matches probably to run at a faster pace. But, you know, at the same time, like, it was fine. I really enjoyed it. If you were going to give this a match rating yourself, what would you have given this first match?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'd probably say 3.5 stars. Given that I guess my star rating system would be that obviously 2.5 is bang average, 3 is like good, 4 is really excellent, getting towards like excellent, 5 is like all-time great level. I don't think this is at the level of what I'd call excellent. It's, as I said, it's really creative. It's telling a really cool story, but, you know, it's not aspiring to be an all-timer. I'd probably go with 3.5.
I went with 3.25 myself. Like, it's a perfectly fine TV developmental show match, and it's a small enough feud. Now, unfortunately, Dave Meltzer, hasn't reviewed this match that I'm aware of. It's not.
Oh, come on, Dave.
Yeah, I know, right? It's not on Grapple. I've looked on Grapple. I can't see any sort of, you know, heading for FCW. So the only gauge really we have here is Cage Match, which after 29 votes, it gets an 8.43, and that's roughly, you know, I think everyone went probably over at least 7, which no one really rated it really low. So that's where we are. But for me, like, there's nothing.
I'd say probably the only people that are rating this are like massive Dean Ambrose fans. So, so I'm not surprised it's high. But
obviously,
that's the
we're
equivalent
big
of
fans.
above 4-star match. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we're big fans. We have to be objective as things. Like, I have to call a spade a spade. Like, it didn't blow me away. I don't see where it gets the fandom from. It's really good. It's nothing bad. It's an enjoyable match, but nothing more than that. But like the feud itself then continues, and that's, I think, to be honest with you, it's building up to hopefully the next match and the rematch, and that's where I think we're going to get the payoff, or at least that's where it's expected to go. So I'm happy as this is a starting point. This is a good match. I was happy with 3 1/4. I'm a bit less generous than most people, I think. I think it takes a little bit more to wow me than most people. But yeah, it's nothing wrong with this match, whatever. But we continue, we go forward, and Ambrose goes on to his other stories, and Regal goes back to commentary. But the story is still simmering under the surface. Like, it's Regal still reinvigorated to an extent. He feels like Ambrose has reignited his career nearly. He's got that fire and that passion a little bit. He's enjoying taking Ambrose apart, even though he kind of knows Ambrose is probably going to be the guy that's going to take me out, because he's bitter, he's hurt. Not only is he physically hurt, but his pride is hurt. He wants to get that Regal scalp, and he wasn't able to obtain it. And what did you make of? Again, it's a developmental build. It's very sketchy, and it's very loose. But what did you make of the build to the next match? Regal commentary, Ambrose trying to goad him, trying to get him back into things, and everything in between.
I love just how much Dean allows Regal to live in his head. He's Dean Ambrose at this point is like obsessed with taking out Regal. Like, nothing else matters to him. He doesn't care about the championships. He doesn't care about other things. He just wants this revenge. This is the pinnacle for him now. And he tries all these different ways. He tries playing up for Regal's pride, saying like, yeah, sure, you beat me once. That was a fluke. And it, even though I was the beaten one. Like, I demand a rematch, and like almost saying, he starts using Regal's stretch as well.
Yes.
And he's almost like saying, like, you don't have the right to take this away from me. I deserve to have this rematch. You don't have the right, even though this guy's the winner, right? Like, he does have the right. He can say, I won. Like, I don't have anything else to prove. But Dean's like saying, you don't have the right to take this away from me because I need it so much. And I think the way that he describes it in one of his promos, he says, a loss, like this loss, it's a dull blade twisting in me. Like, it's all he can think about. It's all he can do. And he wants to give it back with interest to Regal. Like, he's just so obsessed with this, with what happens. And, it foreshadows how he will so completely obsess with what Seth Rollins has done to him for years. And that will be like the driving force for his character for years when he gets betrayed by Seth Rollins. And that will even affect, like, for instance, down the line, he gets betrayed by it seems minor, right? But he lets another. This is 2016 SmackDown. He gets betrayed by James Ellsworth, and like for any character, that might be minor. Like, that's minor. He's a comedy character, but for Dean Ambrose, this is like another guy who he's let in and has betrayed him. And so, like, of course he wants to murder James Ellsworth. Of course he'll, like, throw him to Brock Lesnar and watch him get murdered because he's been betrayed and he's obsessed. Like, his mind is obsessed with being betrayed. And this match at this point, what Regal has done to him is what's obsessing at the time.
It's the Bailey effect nearly, like baby faces are designed to be, be eventually betrayed, aren't they? Like, that's the thing. For example, Bailey has always been betrayed, especially in her infancy.
Yeah. When
she was the hugger, she made friends with everyone, whether it was Becky, Sasha, Charlotte. They all turned on her, and you gotta think this guy needs to, she needs to turn the page here and stop trusting people. She's too much of a good soul. And Ambrose, fair enough, this isn't the same kind of dynamic here, but there is that kind of, you've betrayed me. I need to get this. I'm supposed to beat you. I'm supposed to be, and I'm not getting what I want. I want this. And like Regal, like, again, he's so good at just his character work. He's downplaying things. He's trying to not give Ambrose really too much ammunition, but by not doing that, he's giving it to him. You know, he wants. He's like a kid jumping on a swimming pool, like, diving board, watching his father to, you know, like, come on, watch me dive, Dad, watch me dive. And Regal's just like, I'm too busy reading the paper, I'm good, you know. And but like, did you see the Bronson segments here, like where he end up doing the double Regal stretch? Like, I think that was a really good visual.
Yeah.
And it was. The melodrama usually can take too far, but I felt this was just the right amount. Looking at each other, staring with the duel. Like, for those of you who don't know, Regal gets attacked here by Bronson, and he ends up throwing him into a Regal stretch. But then he gets attacked by someone else that comes down. But Ambrose makes the save here, uncharacteristically, because he wants Regal to himself. He doesn't want anyone to take that. He's going to do this. And they both have the dueling side by side Regal stretches, and it was such a good visual, as if, you know, like, I can do this too, and I'm enjoying this. So like, yeah, we're both enjoying this, and we're going to enjoy this further. And like, it culminates then to this match here, and it's obviously one that's obviously very big in obviously wrestling fandom for whatever reason. Like, it's a myth. I've heard about this before I watched it. It was Regal and Ambrose is the match you gotta watch, and I now obviously just put it to the side, never gonna watch it. But from reading his book, and I was like, this is one of the matches I want to start off with. I want to start off with FCW, Dean Ambrose, Regal. Watch this, find something new, and see exactly what makes this match so special. And like, again, Dave doesn't give it any stars. There's nothing that I can find on it. There's nothing on Grapple. So we're down to you and Cage match, Sam. So what did you make of this second bout, and obviously the defining moment of this feud?
And super intense, like, and it's such a great bit of sequel wrestling in how they build on what they've previously done. Like, you know, this time when they're in the ring, there's no trash talking, and Dean is just super intense.
All
like,
business, Dean Ambrose.
He looks like he wants to eat William Regal for dinner. He's, like, he knows he's going to kill Regal to his bones. Like, deep in his soul, he knows he's going to kill William Regal, and he doesn't care. And, you know, like, to jump towards the end, like, he doesn't even care about winning. Even he just wants to beat William Regal, and beat him down and take from him that pain that was dealt out to him those years. Like, I think it was, how long was between these matches? It was a long time. I think it was over a year even.
You had October to June. So you've got at least 9 months of festering.
Yeah. And he's going to, like, give back all of that pain that it cost him.
And like, JR and Dusty, they're on commentary. First of all, I'm instantly hyped. You know, like, it was like, no disrespect to the guys who were on the last show, like, but this one just felt that this has got big match feel already. You've got the good old JR, who's a legend, you know. You got Dusty, who, like, I can listen to this guy talk all day, no matter what he says. Like, these guys have it. Like, you've the Ambrose, like, he's nearly, you know, catonic. He's staring him down. There's no goofy Ambrose here, which he can be. Obviously, a lot of people critique him about over time. There's no facials here that are over top. He's focused. It's all business before the bell rings. And Regal's just Regal. He's still here. Like, and first of all, like, you see this change in Regal's trunks. First of all, like, he's not going with the shorts. He's gone with the singlet here. What did you think of, obviously, the presentation of this match and how it felt?
Oh, I didn't mind the change. I mean, obviously Regal's not necessarily in his peak ring shape. Not that he ever was, you know, like a huge body guy or anything like that. So I don't have a problem with him going for the tights. I didn't really read anything into it story-wise. I'm not sure if you did, but I thought it looked good, and definitely Dusty and JR being on commentary added a level of gravitas to this match. Feel extra special. I don't know how often they did commentary in FCW. Maybe they did it all the time. Who knows? But, you know, it does make this match feel extra special having those two there.
And, like, the storytelling here before we get to the matches, like, the arm is still a focus. This has been a focus, obviously, in the last match. It's cost Dean Ambrose the match he had with Seth Rollins, because he just couldn't keep going because of his injury. So this has been a nice long-term sell job. It's been subtly done. It's been obviously been used, and, you know, very, very much so in a storytelling point of view. Like, they come full circle here, and it's still bothering him. And for Regal, straight away, like a shark to a drop of blood, he zones in on this. And the story of the first, I think I've counted about 7 minutes, it's all Regal.
Yeah, and Regal's, like, just such a master of, like, the dark arts. You know, he's, like, stepping on Dean's hand and his head when he's walking around. And
I love
as you
that
said,
spot.
he's just going after that left arm again. Yeah, and he's just going after that left arm again. And, Dean's selling it like he's still almost affected by what happened in that first match. But he has been a man possessed, and he has the cardio that maybe Regal doesn't, to sort of come back. And when the time comes around, he like pops his shoulder back in, banging it against the turnbuckle.
Yes.
And then when he gets on offense, he just rails on Regal. And like Regal's selling. We talked about Dean Ambrose's selling before, but like Regal's selling is incredible as well. He looks like mixtures of terrified, in pain. He looks groggy. He like stumbles about, and then he just explodes with, when it comes time for him to fire up and hit a bit of a comeback as well. The way these two structure this match is really cool.
Oh, it's Regal, I think, really does well, especially in the open 6 minutes. He carries it in the sense of psychology-wise. And the match, first of all, it's so much smoother. It's much more tighter. I think the strikes are just really brilliant. Like, I really love the story here. And already it's exceeding, for my expectations, what the last match had. And, like, I love you don't rarely see someone be so clearly dominant so early on, especially if they're the face, it was like all Regal. Ambrose got no offense until the 7-minute mark, and that's when he kind of comes back into things. And unfortunately, then Ambrose, of course, like he ends up, getting the better Regal, tossing him right over to that exposed turnbuckle, which I loved how they did that, by the way, that exposed turnbuckle spot where he's trapped in the stairs. It just, again, it's simple, it's effective, it makes sense, and like it's literally desperation from Ambrose. He's in trouble. He knows he's already had 7 minutes of punishment. This is him trying to get himself a little bit of an avenue to try and get himself back in, and it works really well. And of course, he stomps the hell out of him in that corner when he gets him in there, so much so that his ear unfortunately gets cut open. It looks like he's hard by busted open. His blood is everywhere, and this is it's obviously unplanned, and things obviously have to go home really quickly because it appears that Regal is very badly cut open. Trainers are in. This is obviously in the inception of when WWE don't like to have much blood in the shows, whether it's even in developmental. And like the match kind of ends on a bit of a whimper in that sense. This is really heating up for me. I was really into this. This is so much better than the last match for me. And then the legs cut underneath it, unfortunately, kind of rushed to the finish. But what did you make of that closing segment?
No, I loved it. I loved that. Like, it didn't even get a finish because at that point, the pin count didn't even matter for Dean Ambrose. He just wanted to dull out like all that pain and all that anger and get revenge for his pride. And like, he's completely rabid when everyone comes in, like he's still yelling. It's interesting. Rollins is one of the guys holding him back. This ending reminds me of like a real fight where people have been like, oh, this is starting to get over the top. We need to break this up. And like the two guys are still yelling at each other and like they still want a piece of each other almost. And, not that at this point Regal's out of it, but Dean still just wants to keep going. He's just completely lost it. And like he's just completely lost himself in this chase that he's doing. And, there was a lot of comparisons for Jon Moxley's early character before FCW and Dean Ambrose early character with the Joker, particularly in like his mannerisms. We talked about, early when we were talking about his first promo. And this just reminds me of that line from The Dark Knight where the Joker goes, I'm like a dog. I don't even know what I'm going to do if I catch the car. Like, I just want to chase it. Like Dean doesn't even care about the win. He just wants to keep getting at Regal. And, by the end of it, Regal's almost like begging him to finish it because he knows he's beaten and he just wants to, he wants it to end because he's passing the torch onwards, but not even that's enough for Dean at that point. He's just completely lost it.
Oh, I felt like it was really frustrating. I imagine this had to go home early, but it was.
If you're in the crowd at the time, I think
you don't notice.
Yeah, I think it would have been a letdown. And if you're watching this live at the time, I think it would have been a letdown. But I don't know. Watching it now in hindsight, I kind of love the ending, and I love the creativity of and the bravery of not even going with a finish. Yeah, like they didn't even call a DQ finish or anything. They just like called it off. They were like, This is too much. We're getting out. We can't deal with this level of brutality here. He's gonna kill him.
Like, while from a purely match, pure sort of look at aspect, is like, I'm disappointed. I wanted to see this keep going because they're cooking. These guys are cooking, and finally I'm getting the match which I wish I was got like back in October. And these two guys are killing it, and it's disappointing that I got cut over. But their way to adapt it, you adapted the whole way that like it's seamless. Like the match, fair enough, doesn't probably raise the bar could raise to, but from a storytelling point of view, it's probably even better because Ambrose looks like a badass. He's a killer. He's a psycho. He doesn't give two craps what's happening. He's got what he wants. He's got Regal. He's got him wounded. Especially that final knee trembler. He's looking up to him as if, like, come on, I'm proud of you, son. You're where you want to be. Ambrose just puts him out of his misery. It was fantastic. And then we get the obviously the superstars coming in. You got some Seth Rollins, Chris Hero, Juice Robinson all coming in. They're all
small world. Wrestling's a small world.
Bo Dallas is there. Like, it's like, oh, remember these guys? I haven't seen these guys in so long. And like, Ambrose looks like an absolute maniac and a boss coming out. It's like, it looks so well. He's put the old dog out the backyard. He shot him. He's got what he wants, and now he's like, where to go now? Like, I've got what I wanted, and I think it's perfect end to what this was. I think they adapted really well to the unfortunate situation, and like Mox discusses this in his book. He's really proud of this whole match, and like he feels that, like, while obviously he didn't get what he wanted in terms of the match, he feels like what he received was, as he puts it, even much more beautiful. Like, Bill DeMott made the call to sort of go home. You got the blood. He's hurt. You got to call this. Like, and from a safety point of view, it's the right call, right? Even if we do hate Bill DeMott somewhat, like, but it's the right call to make. He's called it, and they adapt really well to try and make this something else. And again, it looks even probably better for Ambrose's character in hindsight than probably the way it probably would have went for the match. But we'll never know. But I really loved it. I thought it was an unfortunate ending that they really made, like, they took shit and made it into something really good.
Yeah, I agree. And
they took lemons and made lemonade.
Yeah, as I said, I couldn't care less that it finished the way it finished. Like, I love what it says for the story. Like, I don't even know if Dean, in the state of mind he was in, I don't think he would have even gone for the pin. He would have just kept on going until, like, they had to break it up. Otherwise, they would have had like a dead body on their hands in the ring, and no one wants that. So
that's it. And he admits back then he's very much frustrated. He's looking at it and thinking, I want to keep going here. I want to finish the match. He's immature, and that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, and there's very real frustration coming out as he's yelling as the fight's getting broken up, which just adds to the authenticity of the whole situation.
That's it. And you can see he's genuinely shoving these referees. He's throwing people around like they're rag dolls. It's like, how much of this is Dean Ambrose just absolutely losing his shit, like, and how much is this Jonathan Good losing his shit. But like, I admit, like, from a match point of view, I think I've gone 3.75 stars. I thought this was definitely 3.75, and from an angle point of view, I'd probably even go 4.5. It was tremendous finish. I loved it.
Yeah, all up, I'd go 4 stars on this second match. Absolutely. I've waxed lyric about it enough. Like, it's just really great and creative, and it's brave to just finish a match in this way. And given that it's in like developmental, it's just this whole feud does such a good job at just completely usurping the expectations that you'd have of a feud like this. I think it's a brilliant little feud, and I part of me goes, I wish William Regal had done more with developmental guys. But then another part of me is like, no, the fact that he only did it with one person makes it extra special. And if he'd done this sort of thing with other people, it wouldn't have been as special as what this actually is.
Well, he did try and revisit a kind of similar feud in NXT with Cassius Ono, which is obviously Chris Hero in when he was in his first developmental stint in WWE. But again, like, this feels special. I can see why there's a bit of fanfare around it. I can see why people obviously, like, they do wax lyrical about it. Like, I don't think it's probably deserving of the huge praise it gets. I think it's probably the myth is probably better than the actual facts here, but I still really enjoyed it. Like, I think, like, as an angle, I think it's really high up there with great storytelling. It puts Dean Ambrose over as a absolute force to be reckoned with. And cage match, they've come back here and they've 9.05 on this. They love this match. 37 votes, all above 8, nothing below. And so, like, one thing I can say is like people really enjoy this now. Again, from my point of view, I think I've seen better. Don't get me wrong. That's not a knock on this match whatsoever. I think but this was entertaining, especially as it culminated to the main point in the feud. And while it probably didn't go as planned, I think they delivered.
Yeah, look, there are some people, right? Like there's some people out there who I've spoken to that will still, to this day, say that the best Dean Ambrose has ever been was when he was in FCW. And while I love the Rollins feud and this feud in particular, he's had many better matches and better feuds since then. I'm not saying in any way that this is the pinnacle of his career, but yeah, this is an early highlight, and definitely for anyone who's looking for like who are the people that are coming through that are going to be special, this should be like standing out like a bright light, right? Like this is incredible stuff. This is doing like getting Dean Ambrose the sort of fanfare that, you know, the NXT acts would get in later years when NXT became a lot more mainstream. But it's doing it on a scale in FCW that it hadn't really happened before as much at all.
For me, obviously, I'm a big fan, but you have to call a spade, and he has the tools here. He has the foundation of he's not green by any means, but he's not there yet. He still has a lot to learn. He's still putting those pieces of that puzzle together. And I think when you look at, let's say, his 2019 AEW debut, that's the finished product. That's where he is. This is where he's suffered. He's learned. He's been. And he's openly talks about this. When he went to FCW, he thought he already had this. He thought he's ready for the main roster. But in hindsight, he looks back and he thinks, well, you know what? I learned how to talk to the camera a bit more. I learned how to work towards the camera. I knew how to get my cues and my spots just a bit more tighter and a bit more honed. And I learned from the likes of Regal and the likes of Tom Pritchard and Joey Mercury. He learned from these guys, and he was a bit of a brash, arrogant guy when he first went in, probably looking from a wrestling skill point of view. In hindsight, he looks back and says, you know what, I needed that. I needed to go there. I needed to hone my skills and get me ready. Because when you see him on the main roster, when he eventually does go up with the Shield, this guy is able to lead a 6-man match with Daniel Bryan and Rollins over other inexperienced people like Ryback and Roman Reigns. And this is what he needed. He needed this feud. You can see in his first match, in my opinion, it wasn't as good as the second. Not to say it was a very bad match or anything like that, but he grows as a performer. He evolves. Like I said, he's putting the pieces together, and he gets to the point now where we look at him in 2019, he debuts at AEW. He has the pieces here. He knows what makes him work. He knows his strengths. He knows his weaknesses. They get highlighted, they get hidden, and he is an absolute, compelling character to this day.
And I love that years later, in the G1, particularly in the G1 in 2019, Dean would have liberal usage of the Regal knee, which is a nice little bow, a little full circle moment. When he's in the most competitive environment he has ever been in and possibly ever will be in, he's going back and he's pulling out all of the tools and all of the things he's learned from the people that he's fought previously, and one of those is the Regal knee.
The one thing I like to always do now at the end of the podcast, and this is always the first episode, so what I always like to do is what is your Sam Brown? What is your best Moxley moment to this day?
The best Moxley moment to this day? Oh my gosh, there's so many. I'll mention two. There's two that I'll always hold really close to my heart. Firstly, the reuniting with Seth Rollins in 2017 that sort of brought that whole character arc to a kind of a conclusion, I guess. Obviously, the Shield and Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins went on to do more things in the future, but I think that put a bow on the arc that happened when after they split, they feuded against each other. Rollins changed, Ambrose changed, and they were able to forgive one another finally, and then go on in the field of battle to win against a tag team, win the tag team championships. That was actually the reason that I started writing about wrestling in 2017. That was the first article I ever wrote was about that, and that was what inspired me to write it. The story that these two had told up until that point, and I could see that it was climaxing, and I wanted to write about it. So that was the first wrestling article I ever wrote. So definitely that moment. And then I would say that week that there was where he debuted in AEW, he had the Jericho podcast midweek, and then he had the match against Juice Robinson. I'd say that whole week was just absolutely phenomenal as a fan. I'd literally written a column on Wrestling Headlines that said that Dean Ambrose is gone. The WWE doesn't deserve you. And I was really sad because this was the guy that was the linchpin of my wrestling fandom. As I was speaking to you beforehand, I came back. I watched wrestling in those years, and I came back in 2014. And the thing that caught my eye most, other than Daniel Bryan, which is what I'd come back to see, was the Shield, and particularly Dean Ambrose in it. And that rivalry between Rollins and Ambrose had been like the centerpiece of my fandom, particularly. And I was really invested in Ambrose as a character and as a wrestler. I loved watching him, and I thought that he was gone. I didn't think he was going to wrestle again. To see him come back with a vengeance and like really vindicate like the thoughts that I had about him, of what I thought he could be. I still think to this day, I will never be swayed in this opinion that he should have been the WWE champion in the start of 2016. He should have won the Royal Rumble, or he should have won the WWE championship at WrestleMania. He was the most popular face in wrestling at the time. And it was just ludicrous that the WWE was so set on someone that the crowd didn't want. The Triple H Roman Reigns match ended up shitting the bed at WrestleMania. If you put that Triple H Dean Ambrose match that happened like 4 weeks earlier at the main event of WrestleMania, it would have been a fantastic main event match and something we're always talking about to this day. Didn't happen that way, but I was convinced that this was the guy who should be the man. And could be the guy. And over the years, people dropped off and people started to question him. But that week, and then 2019, 2020, but that week in particular, I'll never forget, because that was so vindicating to see, like, yes, this is the man that I have put so much faith in, that I enjoy watching wrestling so much. And he is back, and he's back with a vengeance, and he's going to tear a hole in New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW. So that week after he returned is probably my favorite Dean Ambrose / Jon Moxley moment that I'll always remember.
Oh, I completely agree in the sense of that was the moment for him to be given the baton. You go at the 2016 Rumble, people wanted him. They didn't want Roman, but they proceeded, and we all know what happened. But in 2019, I think we got the Dean Ambrose run that we always wanted to get.
Sorry to interrupt. They knew that Dean Ambrose was more over, and so they took Roman Reigns out of the feud and made Dean Ambrose do the feud for Roman Reigns.
Yes.
Like that is ridiculous that you would do that and then still go on and put, like, you're acknowledging that you understand in that moment that Roman Reigns is not the person to go with at this point, but you're still going ahead with it. Just ludicrous, ridiculous. And then, yeah.
It's mind-boggling the way they book things, but WWE, they'll always be WWE, and this is it now. They make their money and they do what they want. But when it came to Moxley then in 2019, this is the run we wanted in 2016. This is what we wanted, and it culminated in Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho at Revolution pay-per-view in 2020. But this is what we wanted, and again, it's clear to see this guy has something. The fans have always really, at least I don't think they've ever really shat on Dean Ambrose too much. They've always wanted to get behind him. He's relatable.
Yeah.
He's passionate. What's not like about this guy? But
and he went on to have the best face championship run in wrestling in the 2010s, like in that decade. Like no other face champion has had a run as good as Jon Moxley did in the 2010s.
I don't really think they know how to book a face champion. Even to this day, I still don't think they know how to do it. Like you see how they book face champions, and they've always had a very bad track record of being able to do this. So it's been very refreshing watching AEW to see, well, here's Hangman, here's Moxley, whoever else is going to be down the road. It's great to see they actually know how to do this. It's not impossible. It's not rocket science. And unfortunately, it was never meant to be for Dean Ambrose. We'll segue now to the end, Sam. It's been absolutely fantastic discussing pro wrestling with you, and of course Jon Moxley with you. It was a great match to get into, and first of all, thank you so much for coming on. If there's anything you'd like to plug, where can people find you? Where can people read and listen to your content?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, Sir_Samuel. And you can find my podcast, the AEW Match Guide Podcast, which Joey is on or will be on, depending on the timing of this, when we talk about Jon Moxley versus Chris Jericho. Each week, I deep dive into some of the best matches in AEW history, so we focus on a match, kind of very similar to what Joey's doing here with focusing on Dean Ambrose feuds and matches and points of his career. But we just focus on a single AEW match, talk about the build-up, talk about the match itself, talk about the legacy, and yeah, definitely give it a listen. As I said, it's the AEW Match Guide Podcast. You can also find it on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. So yeah, give that a listen. Let me know what you think. And yeah, if you ever want to talk some Dean Ambrose or Jon Moxley, you know I will not be short for words. So you can always hit me up about that.
Oh, Sam, it's been a pleasure. I'm a big fan of your podcast and how you break matches down and just how you give a real positive yet, very, very fair take on pro wrestling AEW sort of, highlights throughout the year. And let's be honest here, thankfully there has been AEW highlights. They are an absolute breath of fresh air. As you know, they pulled me back into wrestling. So it's been great to be able to listen to your podcast, listen to how you obviously observe and analyze these matches. And again, listen, there's nothing not to like when you're discussing pro wrestling, am I right?
Absolutely. Particularly when you're getting into like the things that make you a fan. Like I'm a big advocate for people focusing on, particularly with the kind of media and stuff we absorb around wrestling, like focus on the things that you love. Doing the Match Guide Podcast, talking about the best matches AEW's had, has been a breath of fresh air for my fandom. And I'm sure this podcast series is going to be for you as well, Joey, and the people that listen in.
Thank you very much, Sam, for coming on, having a chat with us. And don't forget, guys, you can get involved. You can obviously tweet us at Mox Podcast, and of course tweet myself at AwesomeOJoe. You can obviously talk to us about this particular episode or any other favourite Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose moments or feuds or careers, any sort of opinions. We'd love to hear from you. That's everything for today, folks. Have a good one and join us next week.